Hello and welcome to the next episode, the next lesson of Cylinder Radio. I'm your host, Will Reusch, high school teacher in Los Angeles. Now it's teaching via Zoom. um, but today I have a guest that I have been hounding for about a year to come on the show, and just because schedules are always crazy and stuff like that. She's a busy lady, but she is here now, and I'm thrilled. It's Tezlyn Figaro. Or Tezlyn Figaro, which can go both ways. She is a political consultant and author, a public figure from Fox News and The Breakfast Club, among many others. Tezlyn, thank you for coming to Cylinder Radio and having a discussion with me about the nuance of Black representation.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for having me.
Can you just give us a little bit of your background for people who are unfamiliar with you? Just like, kind of where you're from, kind of what got you into the life that you're in right now?
Sure, that will probably be a very long story, so I'll keep it brief.
Yeah.
But I own Tezlyn Figaro Communications Group. I've been in politics, media, some level of politics probably for the last 20 plus years. I grew up, my mom worked at a radio station in Oklahoma City, the TV station in Oklahoma City, so I always grew up around TV. I was always every weekend at the TV station. She was a news director, secretary, so I knew that eventually I would find myself in TV. The problem was I knew that on TV I couldn't give my opinion. So it wasn't until Court TV and the 24-hour cycle that happened with the O.J. Simpson trial when I was in high school that showed me that, wow, okay, there is a place to actually be on TV and give an opinion at the same time and talk about the law. So, which is politics. I tell people all the time, politics is the law. Everything is about writing laws, upholding laws, creating laws. It was always my dream to go to law school. Still want to go to law school, but I have a 12-year-old, and so I have to manage how to go to school and take care of yourself, and take care of her as well. I did complete my bachelor's, and also I have a master's in adult education. I love teaching, I love training, but law school is still the end goal. So I've just done radio and television for a very long time. People see me now on Fox News or other national platforms that I've had a pleasure of being a part of, but I've really been doing this for a long time. I've had my own blog talk show. I've had my own television show several times in both Dallas and Orlando. I've lived in Oklahoma City, Dallas, Orlando, Chicago, and now Houston. So I try to bring a little bit with me with every state that I go to. And when people ask me where I'm from, it's a hard question to answer because I feel, there's a place where technically where you're from, my bloodline is Louisiana, grew up in Oklahoma City, but I left Oklahoma City at 18. So I really bring a lot of different perspectives from the Midwest in addition to the South. And then having such an opportunity to work with so many diverse people from all over the country really kind of gives me a different perspective from every walk of life. So that's pretty much in a nutshell. Fox likes to introduce me as Bernie Sanders' 2016 Social Justice Director, but I've had the pleasure of working with a lot of different folks. Attorney Benjamin Crump, who was Trayvon Martin's attorney, also Mike Brown's attorney. I'm still one of his communication consultants. I work on a lot of cases with him. Also was the former director of communications for Nina Turner, who is, a lot of people are familiar with, Bernie Sanders' national co-chair. I was her director of comm before she got with the Bernie Sanders campaign. I've worked on a lot of different high profile cases, whether it's been the Orlando Pulse shooting, the Halscroft rape trial, several different, if I just want to just name them off the top of my head, 4 or 5 at least, the Monroe Bird case, a lot of cases that I've been able to push up to the national level to be seen on either 2020 or 60 Minutes. So crisis comm is what I do heavily. Training is what I do heavily for communications and education, which is why I was happy to accept your invitation, because I believe it's so important that we're constantly educating, that we're not just getting through these 5-minute quick hits that I do on Fox without really kind of digging deeper. So that's a nutshell, but I think it's a lot of stuff about me online if people want to check it out.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. No, that's good. Cause I think just like understanding that you have a very diverse background when it's in entertainment, small business ownership, being a mom, like all these kind of things kind of make you who you are, as it does for everybody. Talking about Black representation, I guess just you've been involved in politics in a lot of ways, and even stuff when you're talking about like high profile like crimes, like you're talking about Trayvon Martin and stuff, that there were so many political implications and sides that are drawn along political lines there. I teach government and civics, And I think civics is crucially important. I think that one of the reasons why I was so drawn to you when I first was introduced to you was you you had complicated nuance in your arguments and your sides of things. It wasn't overly simplistic, and so often politics and politicians want you to believe that things aren't complicated, that things are just simple. Like there's a simple answer, and the person who gives you the simple answer, oh, well, I'll vote for them because they seem like it's very simple, that they can fix it. And you highlight that this is complicated. There's a lot of nuance going on here. It's not just, let's subscribe to one side or the other. What is it about politics that like are you drawn to, and why is it, where do you think, I guess, is where the Black representation is failing in politics and in the mainstream media? Like what are we missing?
And one thing I love, I did a post. I said, oh, I'm getting ready to do an interview about Black representation in the media with a white guy. What better conversation to have? And I commend you on wanting to have that conversation, because I think the first thing starts with being open to hear another side. Unfortunately, in today's tribal politics, it's so tribal, it's so cult-like. I'm in the business, and I can't stomach it, even myself. Like a lot of days, and particularly even today, I had to really just take a step back and remind myself why I'm in this. I'm in this because of the life that I grew up. I did not grow up, with a silver spoon in my mouth, and I did not grow up with a lot of opportunities that a lot of people have, that I do see in mainstream, media. There's a lot of podcasts out there, what they call new media. But when you look at mainstream media and you look at CNN, MSNBC, and Fox, there's probably only a handful of Black folks. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they represent the community that I come from. And so when we look at this term, when we say, Black representation, what does that really mean? I think a lot of times, and I remember this, in Orlando, Florida is really where I got my political teeth. I sat on several different boards. I owned my own company. I had 300 employees there. I sat on Legal Women Voters board, which was an all-white board. I was the only Black person. I was the youngest as well. I sat on 2 or 3 different other government-appointed boards, membership, mission, and review with the county. I sat on the Metro Plan board. I worked with the Urban League. I worked with every different, you name it, I was a part of it, all the way from hip hop and streets to politics to government to appointed. I was a part of it. And so what I've learned, and what I learned even then, and which makes me so passionate now, is there always is this thing to think that, if someone is Black, that they speak, number one, for all Blacks. There is a misconception that all Black people have the same lived experience, and we don't. There is the overarching, thing of racism that Black people experience that other people do not. But there are certain sectors in the community that would never hang out with the folks that I do, that would never go to the places that I go, that wouldn't even have a conversation to value these individuals, to bring their perspectives to a larger forum. So I look at a lot of folks who are on, and again, I don't like calling out names and dissing folks, but there's a lot of pundits that I hear talking that had privileges to go to Ivy League schools, or, grew up very sheltered in private schools. I grew up around gangs. I grew up in the 90s, and my neighborhood was, a gang territory. My cousins were in gangs. My boyfriend were in gangs. So my lifestyle, and it's not promoting that, it's just simply, being clear about how I see things and why social justice is a different picture than what other people may see. There are some who have read it in a book, and there's others who have lived it. And so if you have not lived it and connected to those folks, you don't speak from a firsthand experience. And so what I say is, and what I encourage people to do, and I always do, I don't just listen just to, some Black person on TV, but I also try to get involved and listen to other, YouTubes and other folks out there. I listen to a lot of people who are very extreme on the right and the left. Where that is usually discouraged. I'll give him a shout out, like Tariq Nasheed is somebody that he talks about white supremacy constantly. A lot of Black folks said, don't listen to Nasheed, or don't watch his show, or why are you connecting with him? Him and Vicki Dillard and others that Boyce Watkins, I listen to what they talk about. And I've been told, not by white people, but by Black people, not to listen to their ideology. And I think that at some point you need to be mature enough to be able to hear different perspectives, whether you agree or not, without feeling as if you have to insert your opinion or try to convince someone to believe what you believe. There has to be a maturity in this space at some point to understand it's okay to be objective. And there is no one voice, there is no one belief. So when we talk about Black representation, I would say that there is not any as it should be because the mainstream media just will not allow it. I am very clear about why Fox News tends to like my commentary and their viewers. I'm not confused by that at all. I challenge my own house. I challenge the Democrat Party. I challenge the left side of politics. Just business one-on-one, of course, Fox would love to hear someone challenge their opposition. I'm not confused by that. They're not, somebody says, oh, Fox is using you. No, I'm using Fox. The point is to be able to get the message out, because I also know about politics that if I'm not talking about you to your enemy, you will never change. Any abusive relationship, if I'm in the household and constantly screaming at you to stop beating at me and beating on me and beating on me, it never changes unless I go tell the police, unless I go tell my neighbor, unless I shame you enough to get you to change your behavior. So that is the strategy behind why I go in other places and talk about the things that I do. And me pushing Black politics does not mean that I hate everybody else. It means that I'm in this political space because I believe God has called me to this space, just like everyone else is called and has a purpose. I've been called to this space in this particular time, for this particular moment, to speak for a certain sector of folks who have been left out of the conversation. And I hope, that is what people get from me. And they really only get this in these long form interviews. I think a lot of people hear 5 minutes of what I say on Fox and they just assume, oh yeah, she's on our team. And then when they get to know me and hear longer form interviews, they realize, oh, maybe they don't like me as much as they thought. And that's okay too. But it's bringing people into the fold. So when we say what is missing, to me, it's not even just about Black representation. It is a various levels of class in addition to race. Those who are afraid, those who are clear about saying, I'm talking about Black. I'm not talking about minorities. I'm not talking about people of color. I'm not talking about different sectors. I'm talking about Black. And so I just think the way the power dynamics are, we will not see that in the mainstream. And that is why so many others have decided to push their own podcast and their own message. And a lot of these podcasts do numbers more than MSNBC and CNN or even Fox. Yeah. And that's where I think where we are. It's not about changing the mainstream media. It's about creating more outlets, independent outlets, and allowing those outlets to thrive. And so I try to do what I can. I donate, I tweet, I retweet. I support those entities, even if I don't agree with every single thing that they say.
That's awesome. I'm trying to have a discussion about social justice education, and I have people who are critical of it, and I want to get into that with you later, but I'm trying to get teachers to come and argue for it, and they don't want to. And I got into an argument with a teacher yesterday that said, I can't believe that you would bring these people on your podcast. And I said, I would bring a neo-Nazi on my podcast. And like, well, that's all I need to hear. And I sent him, are you familiar with Daryl Davis?
No, I'm not.
Daryl Davis is, this guy is like a jazz musician, Black dude. And he sat down, had a beer one time with someone who was in the KKK. And the guy said, I've never had a beer with a Black guy before. He's like, how's that possible? He's like, well, let me show you. He's in the KKK. And now he goes out and he befriends KKK members and gets them to turn in their robes, essentially. And I just believe that having discussions, like you said, long form, like let's hear people out. But it's not simple. Like I hear, it's like, if, Black people are going to be either all in one side or all in the other. But why can't we, when we talk about, Black issues, why can't we hear Ta-Nehisi Coates and Thomas Sowell? Like, why can't we listen to both of those, hear them out, interesting, and then make up our own mind? Like, what is so threatening about that? I'm a part of Heterodox Academy now, and Cornel West is a part of that. And he, I think probably aligns with you in a lot of the way that you see things. Just like the concept that we can't hear nuance, and we can't hear things that are challenging to ourselves. And then what happens is you just ignore it, you censor it, and people go back to their echo chambers, and then it just kind of festers and bubbles, and you never actually have it out and have those conversations. Would that seem accurate?
That's absolutely accurate. I'm a mediator. I'm a Florida Supreme Court mediator. So I'm certified to mediate on the civil, the circuit, and the appellate level. I've done hundreds of cases. Who I am is about hearing both sides without inserting your opinion. And a mediator is not an adjudicator. They don't make a decision. You can be an adjudicator to say, hey, I'm going to say who's right and who's wrong, which is what Judge Judy does. A lot of people don't understand. They're really not, real judges don't insert their opinions, but adjudicators can. So yeah. She does adjudication. It's not the typical trial, the traditional trial. Me being a mediator, and that was a really great training and experience that I have and still do, which forces you to sit at the table and either find a common ground or find a solution, or it may not be a common ground. Just lay out where you stand and where I stand and being okay with it. It is a role that I encourage people. A lot of human resources folks are now having to do mediation training to learn how to hear both sides, what we call peel the onion, and not insert your opinion. And I did that training because I am so opinionated, and I enjoy being a mediator. People wouldn't believe that I can sit there for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hours on a case and not give my opinion. Right. And it is a learned skill set that you learn. We are triggered by emotions. And so when people hear things that are that trigger us emotionally, and when that is pushed out by politicians, this is on the right and the left, who push emotion to get people where they just say, oh, that's all I needed to hear. That's all I needed. I don't know. That's all I needed. Then we're in a place, and that's where we are now, where everything is emotionally driven. And it's not just the Democrat side, it's the Republican side as well. Trump does an excellent job of pulling on emotional strings. The Democrats do an excellent job in pulling on emotional strings, particularly when it relates to the Black community. Politicians in general motivate by fear and the hope that they can get rid of the fear of the boogeyman. This is the way politics is set up, and no one side does it better than the other. What I would say with racism is, and Malcolm X talks about this, he said there's really no difference between the white liberal and the Black liberal. One just does something, the white liberal and the white conservative. If either one does you harm, one just does it more tactful and more deceitful and more hypocritical, where the other is outright. So there's a lot of folks, when you talked about the guy who want to sit down with the KKK, I know a lot of people that have no problem dealing with their enemy face to face, because I know who you are. Coming from the 90s and gang world, I use a lot of terminologies. It's not like that now, but in the 90s, I knew if you had on blue in a blood territory, you were an enemy, or red. And it's not like that now, because everybody wears whatever colors. But back then, it was very identifiable. You could identify who was an enemy and who was not. That's why you got tattoos. That's why you said, this is who I am. In the gangster world, there's a respect for people that say, this is who I am and I'm not changing. I understand that mentality. That's why I understand Trump very well. He has a gangster mentality of, this is who I am and I'm not changing it. And I don't give a damn what you think, what you say, what you did. I don't have to like him, respect him, even vote for him. But I understand the mentality of the mafia mentality, the gangster mentality, say, this is the line that I'm pushing and I'm not moving. I wish Democrats were the same. So when you say Black folks, a Black guy will sit down with somebody with the KKK, I'm not surprised, because I know you're the KKK. Yeah. Also understand that there's Black people that will not sit down with the KKK with the hope of changing their mind. I'm not here to change someone's mind. There is a place for that. Let's all sit down and let's understand each other, and let's just, walk off into the sunset and hold hands. That's not my role. My role is laying out the facts, laying out from my perspective on how I see it, which is not right or wrong, and allowing that other person to make up their own mind. I just believe that the human being, we are meant to be complicated. We're meant to change our minds. We're meant to have certain fears about the unknown. And I just think it's ridiculous to believe that I'm not a Martin Luther King. I'm not I have a dream one day we're all going to hold hands. I just don't believe that to be true. And it doesn't have to be true. It can be where I understand you and you understand me, and there is a respect. I don't believe, as we go into the social justice conversation, I don't believe that training more officers on diversity, on what my hair looks like or how I speak or how I act, is going to change somebody from being a racist. If you're a racist, you're racist. That's it. What I would rather someone do is be straight up with it and say, this is who I am, and this is who, so I can easily identify who that wolf is. What I don't respect is a wolf in sheep's clothing. That's how I see it.
Yeah, so that brings up some issues that I'm glad we can talk about, because Eric Smith, my friend who was second guest on my my podcast, educator, he's actually the one who introduced me to you. He said when he's from Indiana, like Gary, Indiana, and he said racism there is like, it's like the Chappelle bit. It's like more an N-word, and like it's like very like out in the front, right? And then he moved to Sherman Oaks, very kind of more upper class, liberal area of LA, and he broke it down for me in a way that really connected based on like personal experiences with my wife and stuff, who's Filipino. Is like it was like almost like a patronizing, like, I'll take care of you. It's a racism where it's like, I will get offended on your behalf, I will take care of you, and then it's like, well, can I tell you maybe what I need or what my community needs? No, I got this, don't worry yourself. And people don't see that. Like, empathy is in our evolutionary code. For if the baby's crying, you go, oh, I want to feel that baby's pain so I can take care of it. So the idea of empathy not having a dark side is, oh, someone's being racist for you, Tezlyn, I got this, you sit down, I'll take care of this, I will defend you and I'll get mad on your behalf. There is a weird kind of pernicious element of that. And I see that in like the kind of elite white liberal side of it. Not saying that, of course, Republicans are racist. There are racist Republicans, and the KKK is real. I'm not talking about that one. That one we all know that racism exists. But the other kind is that, would you categorize that as racism, or what is that? You know
what I categorize it is, I mean, and I blame Black folks for allowing this to happen. A lot of Black people have been conditioned to look for the white savior. Yeah. And it goes from, there's a difference of having an empathy for something, or being sensitive to something, and being an ally, what they would call, when Malcolm X, when he switched his direction, and at the end of his life, when he was willing to allow white people to help, but he was very clear to say that can't happen until I get my community straight. What he was saying is, you can recognize and create spaces, but you can't speak on behalf of Black people. So what happens is they go from saying, hey, I'm going to get mad on your behalf, and I'm going to, we see it in social media all the time, I'm going to be the one to speak up, and I'm going to use my privilege to help you. But that somehow turns into you now being my spokesperson. And now you see white folks arguing on behalf of Black people. And you just simply can't. And that's where I go back to what I said even about Black. It's some Black people that can't argue on my behalf because they haven't lived my life experience. So they can't speak to, how I live. I laugh at them, at elitist Black folks who say, oh yeah, such and such is not invited to the barbecue. They would never be invited to the barbecue that I go to in Crenshaw. You Crenshaw Mafia invite me to their barbecue. Would you go? So I laugh at and that's not me elevating that lifestyle. I'm just, being very clear in black and white, as you will, as we have this black and white conversation, that everybody's lived experience is not the same. So there's white people who can be empathetic, and there's Black folks that allow people to let that empathy go to a whole nother level of being a white savior. So I blame them as well. And then we go back again to circling back to what I said in the beginning. Every Black person can't speak on everybody's head. The thing that I hated the most about the Bernie Sanders campaign was every time there was an issue about race, the first thing they would say is, oh, well, just ask Nina Turner, or ask Killer Mike, or ask, just automatically assuming because they were Black that they were the spokesperson for every Black person in America, or even every Black person in that movement. And it becomes to a point, and just be clear, I adore Killer Mike and Nina Turner as individual leaders, not connected to that movement. I can blast Bernie Sanders and keep them separate, because when I talk about a movement, I talk about the head of the movement. I don't talk about the surrogates. I don't talk about the staff. I talk about the head of the movement. I'm an apologist for nobody, because everything eventually falls on the candidate. But even them, they realize that they don't speak for every Black person. And I'm sure they got tired of being tagged in that. And white folks had that bad. Instead of focusing on why they couldn't get more Black people involved, they love to say, oh, well, Black people were involved under 30. The bottom line is the majority of Black people you can break it down to age, and you can say more Black people with purple shirts supported Sanders. Oh yeah, just the orange. You can try to break it down to fit the narrative however you want. The bottom line is a majority of Black people from age 0 to age 100 went over to the Biden side. And the only argument was Bernie Sanders marched with King. Bernie Sanders was changed to a Black woman. We got 3 Black spokespersons. And that's where we go wrong. And that's where white folks that call themselves wanting to help the Black movement, if you will, or Black voices, that's where they go wrong. But also Black people have to say, I'm not, the same way you're not my spokesperson, I'm not your spokesperson either. If you believe that your policies are better for you and your people, that's fine. But to try to convince me what's better for me and my family or my community, I just think is ridiculous. I just think we just need to be at a place to talk about different ideas and less about convincing and influencing, but putting the ideas out there. And that's what I try to do. I try not to sway one way or the other. They say, oh, you never talk about Republicans. Well, I'm not a Republican, and Black people have voted 90% for Democrats for the last decades and decades and decades. So I have no beef for Republicans. I mean, seriously, I know a lot of Black conservatives, but overall, that's not who my family voted for. So I don't feel like that's who owes me anything. I could sit around and talk about Republicans all day long, but I'd rather talk about the man that's in my bed last night, not the husband up the road, but the man that's in my bed. And so Fox allows that outlet to do that, regardless of their ambition on why. It still has to get out there, because if my voice wasn't out there, then Greg, whoever referred me to you, would have never referred me to you, and so on and so on. So there is a method, behind that madness. But I just think, and I appreciate conversations like this. And you notice when you gave me the topic, I was like, okay, cool. We didn't even have to talk about it and ask, well, what are we going to talk about? What are you going to do? My answers are the same regardless, edited or unedited. And I think we just have to get to a place of we can listen to each other without understanding or agreeing, or let's agree to disagree. We don't have to agree to disagree. We can just know that we disagree on this and be respectful. When I talk about the police, I'm not talking about you loving Black people. What I'm saying is that if you get caught breaking the law and taking away, abusing someone's civil rights, you will be reprimanded. I'm not talking about trying to change your heart and mind, because your heart and mind is what it is. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in singing and marching and crying and begging. It means that if we need to create laws that are in place that says that if you get caught doing X, Y, Z, your ass is going to jail. I don't know if I can cuss on your podcast or not, but that's what it says.
Yeah.
It's not creating this falsified. I just don't live in those hypothetical worlds. Sorry, the answer was kind of long. You got to cut me out because I'll.
No. I don't. I want to let you go, but every time I was like, oh, that reminds me of this. Reminds me of this. Reminds me of this. I think a problem is we are not legally, but we are segregated in this country, and there's a lot of white people who don't have access to people in the Black community. They might have a Black friend. So then whatever their Black friend says about that, they just hold that to every Black person. I was talking with someone recently, and I said, I read something that roughly, 40% of Black America is to some degree conservative. And she just didn't believe me. She's like, that's not true. And it's well, because that, you might have Candace Owens or something like that, but there's very few that get promoted as this is a viewpoint. But also, like you said, a lot, 90% of the votes go to the Democratic side. So people think conservative, oh, well, they must vote for Republican, but that's not the way that it works. But one other thing I just want to touch on, and then I'll just let you go again because I love it. But one of the things is when bringing up the social justice issue, the social justice canon, and I had James Lindsay on here, being very critical of the way that social justice movement is going, critical social justice theory podcast. And whether it's Robin DiAngelo, Peggy McIntosh, Barbara Applebaum, these are all, Ivy League or highly educated white liberal people. And they have written the books set up about white fragility and all this kind of stuff, and unpacking the knapsack and white privilege and all that kind of stuff. That I don't know, that it feels very much like you said, like I think white people want to, when you say like black people, you put it on black people to say like the great white hope. I think white people want to be that hope.
Mm-hmm.
We want to get the props. We want to get, you're cool with us. You helped us out. You're great. You're our savior type of thing. I think white people love that, which is why it's so difficult to have a challenging conversation about social justice, because if you say anything against it, you're automatically a racist, don't like black people, want to keep them down, all this kind of stuff, where that's not the case at all. I don't, that's not the way I think. That's not the way James Lindsay thinks or Peter Boghossian or any of them. It's maybe the way we're doing this isn't the best way. So let's talk about that. But you almost can't. And white people are so scared to be called a racist that they won't have this conversation with you, because they'll just sit back and whatever you say, yep, good. Okay, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. Like they're scared to be labeled that way. Does that make sense?
And a lot of times, and when you say they want the props, it really just comes down to the power. And that's, again, what I was saying. I was just listening to that this morning, just one of Malcolm X's old clips where he talked about it's all about power. So it's not even from a feel good, like, oh, I saved you. It's because if I save you, just like any other abusive relationship, if I bring in a stray cat and feed that cat and give that cat food, and that cat is going to be loyal to me. And at some point, there will be a loyalty that will feel as if you owe the master everything, because they are the ones that fed and clothed and saved you and all of that. That's why stray cats are very different than house cats. If you look at, I mean, this is just basic mammal type stuff. If you take a tiger or a big cat, a tiger that's been raised, we look at Tiger King, for example, that was raised with humans, they wouldn't survive in the world of the jungle because they wouldn't know how to fish. I mean, how to hunt. They wouldn't know how to protect themselves. They wouldn't know, even though they're still a big cat with the claws and the power and the teeth. But because they've been saved by a human, that's all they know. And so this comes
subconscious though. Sorry, but that's got to be subconscious. I don't think that like my white, like very progressive friends don't think that way consciously. They're thinking, I mean, as far as I know, they're really good people that are trying to do the really good thing, and they see racism and they go, oh, I need to be active. You know, Black Lives Matter, you know, vote, you know, blah, 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 whatever it might be. They're going to tote that very loudly and proudly and virtue signal that. I don't know if it's conscious, like, so that they can have power over them. You know what I mean?
Well, you know, I can't speak to what people think, but I can just say my percent is, I didn't say like somebody's getting up saying, oh yeah, I'm going to do this so I can rule black people. Subconsciously, this is how it's worked in America. That's what white supremacy is all about. Otherwise, why they're fine with a lot, and I'm not going to say there as everybody in a whole, I'm just using certain folks. A lot of folks who are progressive and white liberals and Black Lives Matter, they have no problem with that as long as they're involved, as long as they're included, as long as they have input, as long as they still have power, as long as they have positions. The moment I start saying, you know what, Black Lives Matter, we're going to talk about Black Lives Matter, and we're going to be in control of this ourselves. We're going to only have our own selves in position. We're going to only talk about us. We're going to only talk about, and it's okay for you to root us on for a distance, but we're going to control this. That's where the problem comes in. See, the folks that you're talking about, or maybe that you're talking about, they're fine with working side by side with white folks and people of color. And this is there is no people of color as far as I'm concerned. You are what you are. If you're Hispanic, Hispanic. If you're black, you're black. If you're Filipino, Filipino. There is no one big bubble of just a whole bunch of colors in a crayon box, and we all just identify under this one terminology. So I'm not saying that somebody thinks that outright consciously, but there are people that do think that outright consciously. There is also the subconscious in the DNA of America that has always felt the need. Human beings always want to be in control, in power. This is what mammals do in the jungle. Who's going to have the power to direct the herd? Who's going to be the one to say go left or go right? Who's the one that gets to determine how we move? That is just in the human spirit. So it doesn't have to be consciously. If it's subconscious, that's enough. The bottom line is people need to control their own household. And if somebody else want to control their household and how they see fit, what is the urgency? Why the need to feel that they have to speak on how someone else should raise their children, or how Black people should see things, or why I see white people more passionate about Black issues than some Black people. And I question that. And I wonder what is behind that. There's something else behind that that is driving that need, because the human body, the human spirit, we're animals at the end of the day. We're self-preservation at the end of the day. So if you are more active in something that does not pertain to you personally, there has to be something, subconsciously or consciously, I don't care how you want to categorize it, that is motivating you to have such an interest in something that truly doesn't affect you. I question that. And what is that truly about?
That's a great point. Like who is pushing this narrative? Because it's not like the people on the ground. It's like these ideas of, a lot of the movements in equity and inclusion and stuff like that, they're pushed from somewhere up top. It's pushed at the universities, it's pushed by politics and things. Do you subscribe to like that this is it like a tinfoil hat thing that like, okay, if we get the Black community to divide up the families, the family unit, and we get them on the government dole, and we do this and we do this, then we'll have control? Do you think it's like scheming, rubbing their hands together?
I mean, that's what America was built on. This is the history of this country. It just transfers from the same way wealth transfers to one generation or the other, and poverty transfers from one generation to the other. White supremacy has transferred from one generation to the other. Yes, there were people who were rubbing their hands together 200 years ago to decide, this is how we're going to keep a certain sector of folks under our foot and under our thumb.
And we have to be careful for those in charge who are like, because you can't come out and say, I'm going to try and keep, the Black community down. But what you can say is, hey, I'm going to help the Black community in this way. And it might have, like I said, like a pernicious like undertone of this is a way to control. There's like Lyndon Johnson, after he passed the Civil Rights Act, he said that he would have, the Black community, not using those words, but be voting Democrat for the next whatever years. Like that should be, I'm not saying that, welfare is bad or social justice even is bad. I'm saying that we need to reconcile that needs to be a part of the conversation, right? Like that needs to be a part of this and understand that it isn't as clear cut as I think, like going back as politics might have it set.
Of course it's not. And the conversation is out there, it is being talked about, but you have to want to have that knowledge. Where I'm at with it now is either you are or you're not. You know what I mean? I'm so frustrated. I don't get into long social media debates. I don't, for me personally, I don't try to convince. I love education. I feel like there's a place for that, but I'm all about being an adult educator. I'm all about, are you signing up for this class because you want to hear it? I don't like talking to folks who don't want to hear it. You know what I mean? I consider myself like FedEx. I'm dropping it off at the door, no signature required. You get it, you don't, you don't. If your neighbor does, that's fine. So I appreciate the conversations and people that push those conversations. For me, I'm just kind of over that because I feel it's been enough talking at this point. Either I'm leaning towards the no talk policy. Either you're going to be clear about where you're staying or you're not. And if you don't like me or like the way I move or what I say, I'm fine with it. I don't feel, me personally, I don't feel like I have to sit down and explain. I can't. It's not even about feel. I can't afford to be that way. If I was made like that, I wouldn't do any of the things that I do. I worked for Bernie Sanders. I'm not a socialist, but everybody said I'm a communist. I've worked for partnered with attorney Benjamin Crump, who a lot of people feel he's a Black nationalist. But then there's a lot of people that feel like he deal with too many white folks, but yet he still fight for Black issues. I have sat on conservative leaning boards and liberal boards. I've worked with enough group of folks that I go on Fox. They say Fox is the most racist propaganda station in the country. So, and I'm a Black woman, and they can't categorize me as a Candace Owens. When I say Candace Owens, I'm saying somebody who's pushing people to become a Republican. I was fighting Democrats when she still was a Democrat. Right. They can't. It's really hard to put me in a box, and it's not because I change. It's because I'm so consistent. And so you can't, like I told you before this interview, you was like, oh, let me know if you want me to edit something out in case you say something I shouldn't have said. I don't roll that way. What I say is what I said. You know what I mean? Because this is who I am. And when you get into a space of trying to please others and let other folks like you or try to get common ground or when I want to get common ground, I'll go mediate a case. When I want to educate, I do a training. When I'm doing this, having a conversation, you're going to get it how it comes out. And you just have to be mature enough to understand it. You don't have to like it, just respect it. But guess what? Even if you don't respect it, I'm fine with that too. And so I just think we just have to be mature enough at some point to just understand that.
Yeah.
We are going into a place where it's not about saving the world, it's about saving yourself. White folks have done a wonderful job saving themselves. Black people also have to be about saving themselves. And there's some Black people that will not. That's why you had Juneteenth. That's why Harriet Tubman had to come back and free. I'm not a Harriet Tubman. I'm not coming back for no damn body. I'm leaving one time and that's it. I'm the person on the Titanic that's getting in the boat and I'm leaving. I'm not turning around. I'm not coming back. There are people out there like that. And I commend them. I salute them. I support them. That's just not my role. I'm not coming back. You either get in the boat the first time or you're going to get left. That's just how I see it.
Well, there's cycle breakers. I mean, I said that when I taught in East LA. You know, I was telling these kids, like, there are cycle breakers and someone's going to do it. If you're not going to get your family out of this situation, then you're putting that on your kids, and then and then their kids, and then their kids. You know, I mean, if you get out, and what happened was I saw these kids, some of the kids just kept their nose clean, stayed out of the gang life. They got into college, and then they just left that place in their rear view, and they didn't go back. And they were like OJ moving to Brentwood. They were just like, I'm out of here. And you know, that's a double-edged sword, because partially, you know, I could understand the arguments for, well, they should go back and you know, like contribute. But then I also get the part of these kids who are like, no, like, F that place. I got my shoes stolen on the way to school every day. And like, these kids were screwing around while I was studying. Like, no, I'm getting out. So my kids don't have to be brought back in there. Like, my family now is out, and my family now is going to have a middle-class lifestyle. I think that's really tricky. That's a tough thing. And like you said, like, not categorizing just all people of color. I mean, that even goes for like Asians, because like Harvard had that whole thing where they're like the lawsuit against like discriminating against Asians at Harvard. But categorizing all Asians as the same, to say that someone who's Chinese and someone is like Mongolian or Vietnamese, like very different cultures. You know, some of them are like, you know, you focus on education and that's it. And we'll go without food to get you SAT tutoring. And then the other one is like, no, we're laborers. But we don't think like that. We just think Black people are this, Asian people are this. We should set up laws to help Black people, because all Black people are the same. It doesn't matter if you're Will Smith or you're some kid, you know, in Highland Park. No, all equal across the board. And that's just not, that's so false. And we know it's false, but we just want this like simple, like, quick bite, you know?
And then there's some, just speaking of that, there's some folks like me that, hey, if you don't want to come back, well, don't bring your ass back. I mean, that's fine. You know what I mean? Like, I don't, it's kind of like with a relationship. I'm not begging a man to stay. If you want to leave, leave. We don't have to go to counseling. If you want to go, that's fine. But I don't believe, oh no, let's save it. Let's make it work. Let's try to make it work. I did that. I was in a marriage for a very long time. Shout out to my ex-husband, great guy. But I don't, where I am in my life, there's no, either you're here or you're not. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's it. I want people to call me when you want to cut down the middle, even though it is not simple. Like you said, I'm not a simplistic person. I see other sides of things. But I am truly I do live by my motto, which is straight shot, no chaser. This is how it is.
Yeah.
You don't have to like agree with it or try to get somebody to change. This is how it is. And me personally, I don't like spending a lot of energy and time on trying to get folks to stay in a marriage that they don't want to be in, because what we know about that is, I try to use analogies that people can understand. Eventually they cheat or they leave. If they're not mentally in the relationship, they can physically be there, but their mind is on someone else, and eventually they cheat or they leave. So why drag out a 5-year thing, 10-year in a miserable relationship because you're waiting on the kids to get older, and once they leave, or you wasted all of this time trying to fix something that's broken. And it's not because I don't believe broken people should not be repaired, because I do. You know, one reason why I'm not a member anymore, but I used to be a member of the Potter's House with Bishop T.D. Jakes in the early 2000s. And the reason why I was is because he constantly preached about the potter and mending things and bringing things back that were broken together again. I teach in the prisons. I work with a lot of people who suffer with drug addictions. I work with a lot of people who were given up on. I'm codependent by nature. I think most people who are in this business, you have to be. You have to take on other people's struggles, sometimes to a fault. But I still always had to bring myself back to the place of center to say, this person is 50 years old. If you've been thinking like this your entire life, although it's worth putting the energy to try to get you to see a different direction, I still have to constantly do a self-assessment to realize, okay, listen, I'm breaking myself down with high blood pressure. I've gained weight. I'm so glad I've just lost 27 pounds. But when I look at the stress, of trying to change folks who are not, when I look over time, the stress and weight gain and not eating well and not whatever, then I got to look and say, could all that time have been put more into my 12-year-old or something going on in my house? It was nothing but cleaning up or vacuuming, whatever. At some point, you have to look at your own house. And although it's great to be great and friends with your neighbor, ultimately, you're only responsible for your own house. Yeah. And white people have done that. And I don't have a problem with that. You should be for your own house. I want Black people to also be concerned about their own house. But for the Black people that are not, and for the Black people that are concerned more about Johnny's house up the road and not their own house, I'm fine with that too. I just know I can't come to your house party because we're just built different, and that's fine. I don't need to go to everybody's barbecue. I don't want to go to everybody's barbecue. And I'm using that term like, because they're always saying black card taken and barbecue taken. Who are these people that say who can go to the barbecue and not go to the barbecue? So I just think I love these conversations. I'm glad we had it because I think a lot of people think because I talk about Black politics that I just hate all white people. And that's not it. It is that I love Black people. And I think you can do both. I think you can love yourself and also be mature enough to sit down with somebody that may have a totally different perspective of you and who you are and have an adult conversation without getting in our feelings. I think that's possible. And that's why I think this interview today was really important.
Yeah, I wanted to ask one more thing before I let you go, though. Because when it comes to social justice and social justice theories, and it's such a big part of education now, and I think that I'm curious about your take on it, because I think that the way I see social justice should be done is equality of opportunity, because there are lots of untapped genius in like the hood. Like a lot. And it's a disservice to us as a society that we don't have access to them, that they don't have a way that's realistic, or it's very, very challenging, let's say. It's overly challenging to get them into the positions where they can get the education that they need and the opportunities that they need. And the more that we can do that, I think the better. Where I'm worried that more of the social justice is equality of outcome, the equity idea, that because Black people are 13% of the population, then they need to be 13% of the surgeons or whatever it is. I think that's missing the boat. I think it's a dangerous way to approach it, because it's not getting to the root of why do we not have that to begin with. What are your, because kids are getting it from both sides. Like I have a student that I talked to that has graduated for a while, but he said growing up he was told by teachers out of two sides of their mouth. One side was, you're living in a racist society and you'll never be able to amount to anything. And then the other side is, you can do anything you believe. Like go get them. Like it's this weird mixed message. Where do you see like the general social justice movement? I don't know how much you're like in that world, but like where do you see it as, what should it be doing? And where is it lacking that it should, maybe should focus on? I know it's kind of a big question to finish off with, but it's such a big part of, I've covered it on many podcasts because I'm concerned about the way that it's being done. I really am. I don't think it's going to be beneficial to individual communities, whether it's the LGBT community or the trans community or the Black community or whatever it is. I don't think the way that they're doing it, I think there's too much hypocrisy. I think there's too many gaps in the way that it's being done. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think you had made a comment a little while ago about how Black people are largely conservative, and you're right when you say that. When you say conservative, and I think when you use that terminology and Black people hear you, they think about conservatism, meaning Republican conservative, not ideal, the ideology of Christian, moderate, believing in tradition and conservative, and we are. And so my answer to that question is, it comes from how I was raised. Going back to what I said, I don't know if there's a right or wrong way, because my mother raised me, not school, not, I had a teacher in the 6th grade that called me out my name and said all kind of hurtful things, but my mother always told me I could do whatever I wanted to do. My mother was never on government assistance. She worked 10 jobs, literally, 10 different professions full time at the radio station. She had her own typing business at home. She was a cosmetologist. She was doing curls and perms at night. She sold real estate. So my grandmother raised me, and my mom always to sit on my own bottom, is what they call it, to never be dependent upon anyone, not the government or not even a man for that matter. But also my grandmother is a Democrat. And I tell her all the time, Grandma, you're really a Republican. When you really break it down, like she drinks 4 ounces of juice a day, literally, like she doesn't believe in wasting. Everything is very conservative, from the portion size to, my grandmother is 88, I believe, and looks probably every bit of 60 or 70. She grows her own food in her own backyard. When this pandemic happened, I said I could always just go to grandmother. She has a basement full of food that she's canned,
conscientious.
and she grew up. Yeah, I grew up with a lot of self-employed people. So I wasn't, and I don't think anybody should be leaving their children to be raised by society. I don't believe that my daughter should have to hear how she could be anything or not anything by a teacher. That's my job. And that's where a lot of the, when we start, and we could probably have, this could be a whole conversation by itself, but where the different ideologies, when we talk about transgender and bringing that into the classroom, and now sex ed is teaching all of these different little things. The conservative side of me, not conservative being a Republican, but the side of me that says I should be able to pick and choose what's appropriate for my child, is up to me. I don't think government should be, if your kid is having to depend on a teacher saying whether you can or cannot be, that is where the problem is. Because no matter what the teacher tells my daughter, she knows what I told her. Yeah. There is a way to balance to do both. You can understand, recognize that you are in a systematic society that promotes systematic racism. That's just a fact. Laws on the book. At the same time, it doesn't mean that you don't teach your children how to get around and navigate in that system. And so the moderate and the conservative Republicans, Black, they're about small business and entrepreneurship. They're about, a lot of them come from the world of when we had segregation, when Black people were actually doing better, when we had to depend on our own businesses and grow our own food and deal with only business and exchange the dollar in the Black community, versus those who have branched out and moved away and did certain things and did all of that. And now our dollar never makes it back. When I say to the community, I don't mean a certain side of town. I just mean, staying in Black. Killer Mike, shout out to him. He did a great documentary, friend of mine, great documentary on Netflix, where he did the whole thing on buying Black. Did you see it?
Yeah.
Like the whole thing.
Soda,
yeah.
Awesome.
And it doesn't, and because Mike is pro-Black, it doesn't mean he has a white rap partner. Yeah. And his white rap partner understands that he's pro-Black. That's what I'm on. Like, understand where I come from, and I understand where you come from. And we don't have to change each other's mind. We just have to understand this is how I'm raising mine. So I just don't think that that's something that society should be teaching. But I think it should be, to make the question simple, it should be a little bit of both. You do have to recognize the system that you're in. It's one thing to say, oh yeah, you can grow up and be and do whatever you want to do. Well, if you did whatever you wanted to do, like right now, Michigan, if Black folks stormed down to a government building with guns in hand, we would be shot. So right. That's just the reality of systematic racism. Yeah. The rights that are bestowed to others are not always given to us. But that doesn't mean that I can't teach you that it's important to have a firearm and to know how to shoot that firearm and know how to protect yourself and to believe in the Second Amendment. There is there is a way to do both. And I really think that's up to the parent. I sub a lot on my days that I'm not really busy. I sub in the school system, and too much has been left on teachers. I probably spend, sometime this year I didn't spend that much time in the classroom, but every year I probably spend at least 30 to 50 days in the classroom, 6th, 7th, 8th grade. Those are the 3 years that I like to really, because those are the transformative years. And teachers are are expected to raise these children, and that's just not it. And so you have I only go to the Title V schools, the schools that are disadvantaged, the schools that don't have the help. And I see white teachers that think they're helping and they're really pacifying and they're not pushing hard enough. And I see white teachers that I can tell are frustrated with dealing with Black children because of whatever issues those Black children bring to them are not issues that they're familiar with. I see the same thing when we talk about class with white folks as well, but we're having a conversation about Black. Yeah. So I just think at the end of the day, I hate to give this idea that you're on your own because that's not hopeful. And a lot of people want to believe that we're all in this together. Like with the COVID, we're all in this together. No, we're not. We're not all in this together. People are suffering at different levels based upon class, race, access to resources, and so forth. And then I'll say this and then I'll shut up and let you go. Perfect analogy. You know, when I went to Kroger to buy groceries, there was nothing there because Kroger is not as expensive as H-E-B. When I went to H-E-B, milk was there, eggs were there, meat was there because it's a little bit more expensive. It's organic, it's whole foods, it has all that. So it really comes down to access at the end of the day. And when we say we're all in it together, we're just simply not. Because if you cannot afford H-E-B and you're only dependent upon going to Kroger, and a lot of cities, Kroger is more expensive than regular community, grocery store. I'm just using that example. If you can't afford to buy it at H-E-B, you won't have it. And even if you can afford to get it, and Kroger is your only access, like we talk about food deserts in communities, you won't get it anyway, even if you can afford to buy it. So that is the reality to answer your question on how do we have both of those conversations, the realities of where we live and how do you get access to the things that others may not. And it's not always going to be somebody that comes back and gives you an opportunity to do it. It's not always going to be somebody that comes back and puts you on. Nobody has put me on. There's been great people that have supported me throughout my career, but nobody, even with Fox News, Bernie didn't say, hey, you know what? I like your talent. You should go over to Fox News and let me connect you and people don't put me on. I've had to scratch and hustle and keep grinding to get to, where I am and force my way, like you, persistent over and over and over and over. No, that's how I got to this. It didn't just become this way. It was through persistence. And so I just think for me, that's what I teach my child, persistence and never giving up, not to depend on anybody, not to say that not having a husband is not wonderful. It is. Having a man to support you is wonderful. I believe in the union and the sanctity of marriage. Having the government support you is great. It's wonderful. But if you are waiting on the government to cancel rent today, like a lot of folks are, cancel rent. If you're waiting on that, baby, you're going to be homeless because the government's job is not to pay your rent. At some point, there has to be a responsibility factor that knows that they're just not going to do that. That doesn't mean that I'm dissing people that are poor, because if you're poor, you're poor. And a lot of people just don't have that access. I'm not a pull yourself about a bootstrap kind of preacher. I'm saying that for me personally, I've just had to keep going. It took me over a decade to finish my bachelor's, not because I was going to school. I had to stop and start. I transferred to 5 different colleges. I just didn't give up. I kept going back, have the baby, go through divorce. I've moved over 12 times, and I just kept starting and stopping. Not because I didn't have the ambition, not because I had the money. I'm in debt, over $100,000 in school loans. So it wasn't the money. It wasn't lack of ambition. It irritates me when people say, oh, you should just go to law school. What are you waiting for? What the hell do you mean? What am I waiting for? I'm waiting for the bill to be paid. It's not a matter. I've taken the LSAT. I have the letters of recommendation. True story. But I can't teach in the daytime to pay my bills and go to law school in the daytime. The school that I want to go to does not have a part-time program. So this is the decision I'm in. I'll have to wait till my baby gets out of high school or whatever that situation is. But in the meantime, what am I doing to change the law? Am I using my voice? Yes. Am I working with one of America's top attorneys and on cases? Yes. Did I become a certified mediator? Yes. I've done everything that I could possible in the law. And so that's how I live. If they won't give it to you, if you don't have access to get it, then get what you can. And that's what I believe a lot of the moderate Black folks and conservative Black people, the message that they have, that sometimes conflicts with the liberal message. But because conservatives, and particularly now Republicans, have been painted in such a horrible way, a lot of Black people that have those values will just not line up, and not even paint it that way. Some of it is truly that way, but they just won't line up with that side of things, because the brand is so broken that they can't see themselves lining up with that. And so if people were to line up with their ideology opposed to their party, I think a lot will change. And that's why I think third party is important. Registering as an independent is important. Maybe not for this election for some, but certainly as we move forward, at some point, somebody's going to have to jump off the porch. 2022, 2024, I think the two-party system has a lot to do with all of the things that we talked about today. One way or the other, here or the other way. And it's always going to constantly be that balance. There's nothing in the middle that's shaking it up.
Yeah, that's thank you. That's actually a really important point that I want to just now kind of talk about. Like, I think that's encouraging too, to say, you know, control what you can, get your house in order. It's like a very Jordan Peterson thing, like get control of what you can in your life and make the best decisions you can, and go out and try to change the system too. They're not mutually exclusive. It's the Booker T. Washington, go out, get educated, Tuskegee Institute and everything, and W.E.B. Du Bois starting the NAACP and fighting laws. Like, they're not one or the other, but the social justice movement, that the way that I'm deep, like reading the books on it, it doesn't bring up the other element. And then the conservatives are saying, like, pick yourself up by your bootstraps, just work harder. And then, but ignoring the other part, ignoring the part that, like, well, the system is not structured. If you don't have access to, you know, my kids, when I was teaching in like Highland Park area, like, they were having hot Cheetos and Monster Energy drink every morning because that's what they had access to. It's like, this is not an even playing field. We want a hierarchy in society based on competency. We want the best and brightest at the top, and we just need access to these kids. So there is a systemic element of it, but the arguments I get for systemic racism are just overwhelming. They're just so overly simplistic and not truthful, but there are elements of it that's absolutely true. And there's the personal responsibility element. And I think that bringing those together is important. I'm glad you did it, because if I say stuff like that, then because of the amount of melanin in my skin and, you know, my genitalia, I can't comment on this stuff. But we should all be able to comment on everything. And if we're wrong or we have disagreements, then we talk it out. I mean, I think that this was a good model for how to have conversations, because I think that the more that individuals out there, you know, just ask questions and are sincerely curious with the answers of someone who thinks differently politically or from a different culture, a different background. We're just so scared to offend or whatever it is. I think the more that we talk, the better. I really enjoyed this. Tezlyn, where can people find you, social media and things like that, so that they can get access to everything that you're up to?
Yeah, sure. Thank you again for having me. I think this was a worthwhile conversation. Thank you so much for being patient enough to get this going. It's Tezlyn Figaro under everything. I don't use other names or fancy names. It's Tezlyn Figaro. People have wrote good things about me, bad things about me. They've said I'm racist, and which is not true. You know, I tell people that all the time, because I was talking about Black people and how immigration, I put that out there now, immigration affects the Black community. It doesn't mean I'm anti-immigrant. It's meaning that I've been in HR for 20 years. I've worked for the first and fifth largest staffing firm in the world, and I have my own staffing firm that hired 300 people, and I understand HR and I understand jobs. Yeah. This is just a little side note, because usually people Google me, they see that. So that's to say that I can't be concerned in closing, you know, with saying, you know, how somebody is, people are going to have an assumption about you, with you being a white man, regardless. You know, people are going to have an assumption about me being a Black woman, regardless. If they see me on Fox, they're going to have an assumption regardless. We just live in a society, and I understand you're a teacher, so you come from the education side of things. So you're always going to promote, you know, provocative thought. And unfortunately, in politics, we're just in a place. I mean, if you look at most institutions are liberal, college, and they don't have conversations on what it means to be a conservative. No. If there were conversations on what it means to be a conservative, unless you need to be a conservative and you also need to be a Republican and you also better support Trump or else, I think people will be open to having those conversations. But as long as it's that way, I can only speak my conservative mind if I support Trump, and I can only speak my liberal mind if I'm willing to vote for Biden no matter what, vote blue no matter who. We'll never get anywhere any further than where we are now. But what I think is happening is so many people are so frustrated from every side that we're going to force our way there, like it or not. Yeah. And so, unfortunately, but the reality, the more we have, the pandemic is not the only thing that we'll be experiencing. The crash of the market, or the depression, or different things with class. People are getting sick and damn tired of being sick and tired. And so what I'm seeing is different nucleuses of people who are forming their own, and we're becoming more segregated. And what I'm saying is, if you're not trying to control one race over the other, you shouldn't have a problem with people identifying with common minds. I think it's okay to have a conversation and to have understanding. But if you have a problem with how I am having conversations with my community, or those who identify with me, everybody who wears a purple shirt, because again, it's not all Black people. It's not all Black people. When you start spending more time trying to change the mind of them, then I have to wonder where your motive is. If you look at the penitentiary, and I swear I'm gonna shut up, I use the penitentiary as an example because it's a gladiator school. And when you go in, it's the most segregated place that you can be. It's not that Black folks aren't cool with white and Mexican and so forth, but this people of color coalition and all that doesn't exist in the penitentiary. Because when you go into a penitentiary, you are in survival mode. Just like a rat or a mouse or the rats don't go where the rats go, the mouses go together, the rats go, the cats go here, the dogs go here. That is really how the human mind works in survival mode. You don't see lions and tigers and bears all kicking it. Lions go with life. That's right. When you're on survival mode. And it's no offense to the other group, it means you survive. Now, when you break down those certain groups, like you'll find that Black people within that group, they segregate off into their own, where you have certain states that hang out together. If you're from California, if you're from this gang, if you're a nerd, if you're whatever. But if a survival things happen, if a riot breaks out, you ride with your own. And that's the same for white people. And Black people in the prison system ain't mad about that. They expect you to ride with your own. As this world continues to turn and we get out of this thinking that everything is going to be like Martin Luther King's dream, and we get into more survival mode tactics, you're going to see a lot more of people who are branching off into their own and pushing their issue, screaming to the top to say, hey, what about my issue? And so what I tell people, and white people, they can understand it or don't understand it, understand that people are at the bottom that are screaming to say, hey, you've ignored me. It's kind of like this Dr. Seuss movie, The Who. I don't know if you ever saw it. I love that movie. It's Who something, WHO. And it was all those little bitty who's that were screaming and yelling. And it was only until they realized we need to get together so that they can hear us up top. Yeah. And so the louder we scream, the more they'll hear. And it's not a disrespect to you if you're not in that group. That group has to realize how to organize and build on their own, because for far too long, they've depended on everybody else building them, which creates a codependency and not independent for themselves. There's been too many wars fought where other people have fought for other folks, but never fought for yourself. And so any self-respecting person should understand that, because I understand that if right now, if there's no food through the coronavirus, are you going to go shopping for me and my daughter, or are you going to look out for you? I think you're going to look out for you and your family, and I'm going to look out for me and mine. And so that's what America is getting ready to experience even more so, and even that next generation. And I'm trying to teach my child how to survive. I tell her stuff all the time. I said, I got to tell you this because I don't know, I'm not going to live forever. And she hates hearing that. But I have to tell her that because I'm an only child, and she's my only child. So I don't know who's going to, right. I got to give her as much game as I possibly can every single day. I tell her, listen, she didn't want to tell me that boys liked her. She was so afraid because all her other friends, parents are afraid, she are afraid of that. That wasn't how I handle mine. I want to know. I want to be able to help guide you, because I know that when I was at age, I've had my life on the line behind being around the wrong crowd. So I can't preach to her about what I don't want her to do or don't want to be around. I'd rather give her game and teach her how to survive. Her daddy can't teach her that. I'm the only one that can teach her that. So when it comes to our kids, I can only give you just as much as I can. I say that to teachers all the time, because teachers across the board, majority really want to help. You don't get into this field if you don't want to help. It's certainly not the money. It's certainly not the respect. You truly have a genuine, calling to want to help. But at sometimes teachers have to realize they've done all they can do. And unfortunately, by the time they realize that, they're burnt out and they leave the industry because they never found balance. Yeah. They just get burned out and say, forget it, I'm over it. Because they're trying to raise folks' kids. So I think balance is important. I think that's, in closing this interview, if nobody else got anything out of it, hopefully they got an understanding of balance and just trying to stay balanced to stay afloat.
That's the whole idea of the podcast. So
okay,
as a big ranter myself, I just like letting you go, because I go on rants all the time. My class just starts rolling their eyes. I'm like, well,
right. You can't help it. This is what educators do.
It was good. I think there was a lot of great stuff, though. So thank you, Tezlyn, for being here, and hope to keep in touch in the future.
Thank you so much.